Hi, I'm going to show you my workflow that I used for creating my photo of the Singapore skyline. I took 7 different exposures in RAW format. I took them in 1/3 exposure increments. So I'm going to go ahead and open up all 7 of those photos. I'm going to open them in the Photoshop RAW image editor. This is Photoshop Elements that I'm using. And I'm going to go ahead and open up all the images and make some minor adjustments such as vibrance and saturation. I'm going to apply the same adjustment to all 7 photos, so I selected them all. And here I'm going in and just doing a little bit of noise reduction, and then I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of clarity, and then I will open up all the images in Photoshop Elements. So in Photoshop Elements, I opened up all the images, and all I'm going to do right now is save them as high quality JPEGs. And now that I have them saved, I'm going to open Photomatix and create an exposure fusion. So here I've selected all 7 images, and here's the exposure fusion screen. I'm going to go ahead and basically reset all the settings and start basically playing with the sliders until I get the look that I like. The midtones adjustment seems to be the most important one. I do that one first, and I go for blending point, and then play with some of the others until I get the look that I'm going for. Exposure fusion won't produce as dramatic of an image as an HDR, but I'm going to be doing both and blending the two together. So here's the exposure fusion. Once I get the look that I like, I'll process it, and I'll go ahead and save it. I'll close that, and now I'll do the same thing, but this time using an HDR in Photomatix. So I'll open up all 7 images, and this time I'll specify that they're in 1/3 exposure increments, and I'm going to select to have it reduce chromatic aberrations and reduce noise. And so now we have to do tone mapping in Photomatix. The light smoothing, here I selected the default preset, and the light smoothing is what I usually is the most important slider to play with. Usually set the strength a little bit high. The saturation I don't usually play with too much because I've already saturated it in the raw image editor. So here I'll play around with the sliders. One other thing I do is I usually take out any of the micro smoothing because that reduces noise, but I can use a different program to reduce noise. So I'll keep the detail for now, and I'll process the image. Okay, so now I'm going to save this. I've got an HDR and a exposure fusion version. I'll open both of those up in Photoshop Elements. You can see they're quite different. Here's the exposure fusion, here's the HDR. I'm going to go ahead and adjust the levels on the HDR and just make it a little bit darker there. I'm going to go ahead and just merge that into the final image, and I'm going to do a levels color curve adjustment. Just get it looking more of the way I want, add a little bit of contrast. Kind of want to highlight that bright orange area in the sky as well as the reflections on the water. So the HDR is my more dramatic image, so I'm going to add a lot of drama to it, but then when I blend it with the exposure fusion, it'll be more realistic. So here I'm doing the same thing with the exposure fusion, level adjustment and a color curves adjustment. Once I get the look that I want, I'll save that. Alright, so I'm going to basically take my HDR, copy it into a new layer on my exposure fusion, and reduce the opacity until I get the look that I want. This is basically blending the two together. So you'll see now they're blended together. I'm going to use about 50% generally. So there's the exposure fusion, and that second image is with the HDR blended in. So that's the look I want. I'm going to merge those layers together. I'm going to go ahead now and do some noise reduction in the sky. So here I'm just selecting the sky using the magic wand. I'm going to select it and then copy it into a new layer, and I'm going to use Topaz, a Topaz Labs product called Topaz Denoise. You can get it at topazlabs.com. So here I'm going to open up that, it's a plugin, so I'm going to go to Topaz Labs, Topaz Denoise, and do a strong noise adjustment, or noise reduction on the sky. Alright, so I'm going to let that process. Now I'm going to do essentially the same thing for, well, here I'm going to use the spot healing tool to get rid of some of the dust spots that were on my lens when I took this photo. And now I'm going to reduce the noise on the water. So here I'm going to select the water and create a new layer and do the same thing with Topaz Denoise. I'm going to reduce the noise there. Alright, so now what's left to do is I want to sharpen the buildings, add a little bit of detail to the buildings. So I'm just going to adjust sharpness and set it to about, I don't know, 1.2, something like that, just to bring out a little bit of the detail in the buildings. Alright, so now we're going to merge these layers together. Pretty much got a final image, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to enhance the contrast a bit. Actually, first I'm going to try to get rid of some of the barrel distortion. I didn't use a very good lens when I took this picture, so the buildings were kind of bowed towards the left and right side of the picture. So here I'm using the transform, free transform in Photoshop to kind of straighten out the buildings. Now the building on the left was curved, that's the way the actual architecture is, but do some spot checking and crop it. And I just wanted to make the skyline a little bit more straight, get rid of the barrel distortion that was product of my lens. Here I'm just checking to make sure the buildings are straight, and they look pretty good now. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is adjust the contrast. Just make it a little bit darker in the dark areas to highlight the reflections in the buildings. Now I'm going to use Topaz Adjust, and this is optional. This is a different plugin that just kind of adds some flair. You'll notice there's several different presets. I don't want to do anything too dramatic. I'll show you some of the things that can be done. This is Photo Pop. That's kind of the preset that I'm going to use, but I'll show you a couple of the others. This is real dramatic here. You can define your own presets. You can get pretty crazy with this, but I prefer to not get too crazy with my HDRs. So here I'm going to use Photo Pop just to bring out the colors a little bit more detail, and I'll go ahead and process that. So now I'm going to save it, and I basically got my final image. If you'd like to see me give tutorials on any of my other images, you can view them I'm going to show the websites right here, jimboud.com, or my Flickr photo stream, flickr.com/boudster, or photos@jimboud.com if you just want to shoot me an email. Thanks for watching.